As a parenting expert who has worked with thousands of families over the last decade, I've seen how a collaborative approach transforms relationships and creates harmony at home. This is why I created the Happy Confident Club, a space where parents and children learn essential skills together. Our platform offers courses on understanding feelings and emotional regulation, alongside powerful life skills that equip families with practical tools they can use every day. Just imagine watching a video about how to better manage anger or anxiety with your child, then discussing how you could support them when they feel these emotions, and conversely, how your child could help you when you feel angry. Like when a mother called me to tell me, I was getting angry at my 8-year-old son for not listening. And suddenly he looked at me and said, Mom, your lights are about to flip your lid. Maybe you need some PBS? And this stands for pause, breathe, and smile. He couldn't help but laugh, realizing that their shared language and pre-agreements about handling difficult situations change everything. This is where the magic happens, in these shared moments of understanding and connection, because it will allow you to all respond as a family rather than react in difficult situations. The club also offers practical webinars and live Q&A sessions with leading parenting experts, designed to help you solve all your parenting challenges and build confidence in your children while bringing more joy to your family life. Join us at the Happy Confident Club, where families transform one conversation at a time. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. I'm here with Dr. Maryhan.
Hello. Evening all.
Who I really appreciate for having had many conversations actually together and being very aligned in the way we think. And particularly, I mean, I think you're definitely one of the people I know who's got the most experience in parenting, in emotions. You've dealt this a lot on your podcast, how to not critique your kids. And you don't know what the tick, tick, tick is. Maybe it's, could be either. So I really so enjoy our conversations. And so I thought you'd be the perfect person to speak about my favorite subject, emotions, big emotions, feelings. So I'll let you introduce yourself in a minute, but I mean, a lot of people who join us probably already heard of me as well, because, you know, we've been organizing these webinars for a while. But I do love to come back to my why, and why I actually ended up creating the Happy Confident Company, because it was all around feelings. It was all about, actually love it. People do say hi, say where you're coming from. Yeah, where you are, we love it. Are you joining from, you know, what, where's your locality, where's your country? You may be joining from another country. So please do tell us. We've got a few hundred people on, which is great.
Amazing.
And so, so my story, I'll explain briefly, because I'll then go into more details as we go along. But, you know, so I was a parenting coach already like 7 years ago, and had written 5 books about parenting, very involved, emotion coaching, all of what you want. But then my daughter, my 8-year-old daughter, went through some challenges, and she started just being very resistant, being defiant, hitting her sisters. And I applied the parenting tools, you know, and for a couple of weeks, things didn't really work. I was like, oh my God, well, this is next level. So next level coaching, went deep, and then she admitted, I hate myself. And I think you know this story, Maryhan. And so that was a big moment for me, aha moment of understanding how her feelings, her thoughts actually, about not being a good person, because that's what she admitted. She thought she was a bad person for hitting, etc. Then led to these feelings, difficult feelings for her, feeling sad, feeling angry, feeling, you know, frustrated, feeling not good enough. And then that led to more behavior. And so she went into what I call a doom loop of the belief was reinforced by these feelings and this behavior. And that's where I realized, okay, I've been teaching parents for all these years, but it's so important that we actually teach kids about their feelings, about their thoughts, and how they can regulate these. So this has become my passion, and this is why we're here. And I love our conversation about these topics. And so hopefully we can help, you know, hundreds of people tonight, if not thousands, because we had more than 1,000 registrations, to be able to better cope with these days. So if you could introduce yourself, you know, in all your experience.
Yeah, well, hello to all of you, and your story really resonates very much with me. I feel that what I do is very vocational. I feel that this is my calling and it's my purpose. And so I have two strands to what I do. I work with anxious children, anxious young people, who struggle to manage those big emotions, and feel overwhelmed. But I also have the sort of the education piece, the parenting piece, which is the podcast, How Not to Screw Up Your Kids, and also the education piece in schools, and also talks to parents and within organisations. So my passion, I guess, probably came about from, you always sort of think about these retrospectively. I didn't have a specific moment like you did, Nadim, specifically in terms of parenting, but I did have a specific moment in my own childhood where emotions were just not talked about in our home. It was, I'm, Middle Eastern, I'm from Egypt, and it was just, we didn't talk about emotions. And my father died very suddenly when I was 11. And I wanted to talk about it. And I was like, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. And my mother's way of coping was to shut down and to not talk about it. So it didn't occur to me until I started doing this, God, 25 years ago, that actually that was the whole reason why I do what I do, is because I'm so passionate that feelings are not things that we bury or that we trade or we pacify or anything that we do. And instead they're a normal part of life. What often is the challenge for us as parents is that when we see our children responding in that big explosive way, it feels that we're very much they're experiencing this pain, and really our role is to help them find more appropriate ways of communicating and responding to them. Oh my goodness me. Okay, someone else has got that. And can I just say hello to everybody in Hampshire, because I'm in Hampshire. I've seen a few of you in Hampshire. And for those of you in Scotland, I have just come back from 2-3 days in St Andrews.
Great. Oh, St Andrews. I've got my goddaughter there at the university. Amazing. And hi from North London. That's where I am. Thanks for sharing this. I also come from Middle Eastern background, and I had, the same experience. And I thought I had an amazing childhood. And I did, 100%. Yeah. And I didn't, but so I didn't realize how much that suppression. We'll talk about this actually during the webinar a bit more. So because I like it to do it through a few questions. Yeah. So because I'll share a bit my experience of being completely shut. Actually, I will share it now, just because it's come from your experience, from your sharing. Because I used to go to my therapist, and he'd tell me, "What are you feeling?" And I would go, I think I'm feeling, because I had completely shut down my feelings, because I was told so much that, I don't need to feel, or I need to man up, or I need to, going even through the war in Lebanon and not being able to fear the fear, basically, was too much to fear so I was completely shut off. And we'll discuss during the webinar why it's so important to actually feel these feelings. Why shutting off is actually not the solution. So let's start with why we have meltdowns. Why do we have so many feelings as children? And I would say as adults, because what happens is we often tend to have less feelings as adults, because often good example, we shut them down. And I know a lot of my friends, particularly male friends, who shut down their feelings. So sometimes we ask them what they feel, they have no idea. So where does this come from initially? Like what? And then we'll discuss. The second point will be, why is it important to feel these feelings? But first of all, what is the feeling? What does it represent, and why is it important?
It's fundamentally, a feeling is fundamentally a neurological response in your brain to a situation. That's ultimately what it is. And yet we place so much emphasis, and particularly narrative, around negative emotions and positive emotions. So it's good to feel happy. And of course, who doesn't want to feel happy and joyful? But it's bad to feel angry. Whereas actually all emotions are communicating something to you. And I think quite often where the challenges come in is where we pacify them, because as parents, of course, when we see our child in a huge amount of pain and upset and angry and frustrated or nervous or sad, we want to resolve that. But if we don't allow our children to feel the feeling, because feelings come and go, then they learn, essentially, the narrative and their belief system is that feelings are bad. and that I either shouldn't feel them, I shouldn't identify them, and I should always try and distract and pacify instead.
Totally agree. And this is the next question, which is so important, is why is it so important to actually feel the feelings? Because a lot of parents, you know, the older generation would say, oh, the children were so much more resilient before we told them to, you know, allow your feelings, feel the feelings. You know, it seems, and particularly in the workplace, for example, you still have that. It's like, oh no, keep the feelings outside. And now basically just be, don't feel the feeling. So why is it so important to feel the feeling?
Well, I think feelings tell you something about what's happening in your inner world. So for children, they're communicating what's happening in their inner world. And so much of the, you know, we talk a lot about AI, we talk a lot about technology, but the reality is probably 95, 96, 97% of the jobs that our children are going to have are going to involve people. And those people are people that we need to learn to communicate with, manage conflict with, negotiate, turn take, and you know, all of these factors. And so actually being able to understand, when we think about emotional intelligence and understanding emotions, at the very basic level, we have to understand our own emotions. Then it's understand your own emotions and then how to respond to it. Then it's identify other people's emotions. Then it's being able to adapt and modify. And what we know when we talk about emotional intelligence is that you can measure it in the same way that we measure IQ. So IQ is just an intelligence quotient. Emotional intelligence is an emotional quotient. And what we know to be true is that emotional quotients, the EQ, is a bigger predictor of success in every parameter that we measure success: career, salary, position, friendships, happiness, joy. So it all hinges on emotions.
I remember I've seen this research, and so in terms of success, 75% is actually driven by EQ. That's what, well, of course you can, but higher, as you said, the IQ, and we tend to underestimate this importance. And so I'll give a bit my example actually, as having shut off my feelings. I realized that I really felt it difficult to understand my children's, give them empathy. So when they were hurt, I would actually feel numb. And I was like, oh, I'm not sure why. But intellectually, I would really help them and I would be there for them, but I would feel numb. And I didn't realize until doing quite a bit of therapy that actually this numbness is because me being so overwhelmed by a strong feeling and having been told so often that, you know, I had to suppress it, that I would be completely numb. So I couldn't even relate to my children's difficulties when they were younger. And so now, obviously, thankfully, I do much better. But I mean, actually, now I've got overboard because I've actually realized that I am a very sensitive person.
Yeah.
And so I can feel, I have so much compassion. And that's so wonderful to feel that, and just rather than to be numb when someone's really having difficulty. And the other thing was, I realized that I was told so much. So my coping mechanism has become to be happy and confident. And it's great. And that's why the name of the company is the Happy Confident Company. Easy. The reality is, it seems like, oh, I'm so lucky. And it's true. As a coping mechanism, I am the lucky guy compared to average.
Yeah.
The problem is, what I realize now is I missed out on a whole layer of intuition that I didn't actually allow myself, because our intuition is through the vagus nerve, is really a lot in the gut. Is you have to feel the sensation in your body and understand what your body tells you to really be more sensitive and be more intuitive. And so not just see with the left brain something that's just, you know, oh, that's the decision I'm supposed to make, let's do it. But actually realize it could be, as you said, you then have to take into account what other people are really feeling, etc., and feel into the system. And if you can't do that, then you're not making the best decisions. Often you're steamrolling others and things like that. And so, and I would sometimes do that without realizing. So that's why it's so important to really kind of, and the final bit that I want to add is that cognitive ability. What we don't realize is how much suppressing feeling actually takes some of your cognitive ability out of this, because you're busy, your mind is busy suppressing a feeling that you're having. And so it does affect your capacity and your effectiveness. People love this when I tell them, because then they're like, oh, that's a good reason, because if I can't think well enough, then then okay, I'm going to do something about it. So this cognitive ability piece is super important, because basically we end, the final bit is the nervous system. Is we don't feel the feelings and we actually suppress them, our nervous system is heightened. And there are some things we do. And actually, you know what? I'm just realizing now, let's be honest. I'm on a webinar. I don't see the hundreds of people who are listening to us. I didn't used to feel anything. I was just completely shut off, and I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And it's great. Feel the fear and do it anyway.
Yeah.
But when you feel it, yeah, wow, I'm just like, really, you can actually connect with people at a completely different level. And you can really share from an authentic,
Yeah, and that's why it's so important. So, you know, as you've shared your story, Nadim, I think, you know, any parent that is co-parenting and is finding that their partner, for whatever reason, doesn't appear to be able to empathize, then in lots of ways, having that understanding from Nadim's story hopefully means that we're going to be more compassionate. It's not that they don't care, it's that they've gone through their upbringing, and their childhood and or their adulthood has been all about suppress, don't talk, don't feel. And actually they want to connect, they just don't know how.
That made me emotional.
Oh, sorry.
Thanks for it. No, it's great. Don't be so. How can you be sorry for making me emotional? That's the whole point of this conversation. You made me emotional, because I realized the amount of time that I've been shamed for actually not always feeling, or sometimes getting angry, but the anger comes from suppression.
Totally.
And then what do you get? In French, you say cocotte minute, like.
And that's what we'll talk about quite often, is this idea that we do that with young children, is that their emotions, not all children are going to say, I'm feeling overwhelmed, or I'm feeling nervous, I'm feeling you know, this situation feels scary to me. They will often respond in the exact opposite. They will appear to be defiant, they will be angry, they will lash out. And yet actually that's a defense mechanism, and then there's a whole host of things going on behind it.
I mean, we're not following the question. Who cares about the question? This is not at all. This is the nugget, because I realized after years of therapy that the feelings, the anger that was coming up and would ruin sometimes my relationship, basically, came from powerlessness and shame. And I actually came from a place where I thought I had no shame ever, that I wasn't ashamed, because I'm not embarrassed easily. But actually I was, there's a lot of shame in the system, guilt and shame. We often parent through guilt and shame, because it's a natural, it's the way to get children to be more, you know, to realize that they're making mistakes. So we use guilt and shame, and then we internalize it, and then it comes out as anger and powerlessness. And our children who don't have a lot of control over in their lives, because they don't get to say a lot, basically suddenly it can come up as anger or as resistance. And we've had a lot of questions. We had, you know, so many questions. Thank you for all these. And so we're addressing them as we go. And one of them was around, what do I do when my child gets angry, and what is it? And you know, we were discussing this earlier, and we were saying it's because they probably don't feel control over their lives, and they feel powerless, and therefore we have to find ways to give them a bit more control. Actually, let's keep this for the questions, for the solutions, which will come at the end. But let's continue also on the why is self-regulation so important. We've already addressed it a little bit, but I think it's good to go a little beyond, because some parents, we also know quite a few parents who just go, oh, then feelings are important. Then, you know, feel. Okay, yes, feel. The thing is, feel, but also self-regulate, because otherwise you might you might be overwhelmed, etc. So what do you think about that, Maryhan?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, this is the idea is I think what often happens, and I say this with love to all of us as parents, you know, we're parents ourselves, is that when we see our child experiencing a big feeling, we often want to trade it for something else. It's like, oh, let me quickly, oh, no, let me distract or pacify. And actually we do them a huge disservice, because feelings are transient. They come and they go. And when we facilitate the avoidance, when we take those feelings away or try to pacify them, our children basically learn through their experiences that it isn't something that you shouldn't have feelings. And instead, if we allow them to experience them, okay, yes, sometimes it will be unbelievably explosive, but it is still transitory. And they learn that it comes and it goes. And our role within that period of time is to this notion, we often hear about this idea about self-regulation, but children don't learn to self-regulate without us co-regulating.
Co-regulating.
Our
Yes.
role is to present when they're going, is to meet there with that self-regulation, so we can co-regulate, we can be there with them, we can acknowledge that feeling, we can label it, we can give a name to it, we can reassure them that we love them and that it will pass and that they're safe and we're with them. And once they're out the other side, that's where we have the incredible moments where we can have conversations around, goodness me, you felt this feeling and it just took over you and you felt you had no control, and how might we work through this in a different way, in a better way next time.
Yeah, so true. And so I love what you share, because obviously the transient, what people usually love it when I share the research around what's called the refractory period. The refractory period is the amount of time that our body is filled up with hormones. Basically, the reaction to a situation, as you said, a feeling is a reaction to the external situation, or sometimes internal, but usually external. And it floods our body with, for example, cortisol, which is the anxiety hormone and fear, etc. And what I love, Jill Bolte-Taylor's research that shows that this refractory period, we used to think it was 10 minutes. And recently we've discovered it was only 90 seconds. And so what happens to children or adults, because I hope you're going to learn a lot about this for your sake as well, is that what happens is that we retrigger the thoughts and then the feeling. Usually, and that's what makes it sometimes a mood that can last for hours and hours. So if we had, and that's what we're going to share with you, if we had some of the solutions to actually de-trigger and stop after 90 seconds, change the thought or change the situation and the perspective on things, then we can actually recover after these 90 seconds. And that's where the holy grail, I think, is. So ideally, it's obviously not get triggered in the first place, but then if you do get triggered, as you said, if you can teach our children that it's transient, and then actually they have tools and they can develop the skill of self-regulation, then the world would be a much better place.
And that because emotions are so, we're quite often we talk about this idea about, as parents, we struggle with the big emotions and these explosive emotions often when they're younger, but it isn't unique to young people. We get adults that do it too. But emotions underpin all of the positive things that we want for our children: resilience, confidence. Because if they can't be resilient, they won't participate if they're riddled with these emotions that make them feel that they're not capable, that they're worrying. So emotions are the underpinning, in my belief, the absolute foundations to all aspects of the qualities that we really want to instill in our children.
I completely agree. And it is the underpinning, and that's what we don't realize, and therefore we try and instill these. And for example, I think that it's important to realize that resilience doesn't come from suppressing fear, because that's what I thought. And so what we often do as parents is, you don't need to be afraid. And actually what we realize is, actually, I was with the Duchess of York. I was with Fergie yesterday at a conference. And I absolutely love you. I don't know if you know that she wrote more than 40 children's books.
Yeah.
And she apparently educated 1.4 million children through her charity. I mean, amazing. And so she was on stage and she said, when our children say, there's a dinosaur under the bed, stop telling them there's no dinosaur. Because the dinosaur under the bed is their way of saying, I'm afraid there's something and I'm afraid. And that's their way to say it. It doesn't matter. Just remove that bit instead of actually, and actually there's another example which I love is usually what I used to do is, I would hug. I mean, it's not that I would not, acknowledge the feeling, but I would just go, here, no, there's nothing to be afraid of. I'll give you a hug. But the thing is, what we don't realize, and that's where, is that the message is still, you're not supposed to feel that.
Yeah.
And instead is, you feel afraid. So you acknowledge, on the right brain, and then would a hug help, or would you like to change situation or whatever? Basically, you first keep them in the right brain, and then you shift them to the left brain to then help them realize I can control this. I have the skill of regulating my feelings. So it's so important that we actually acknowledge and then redirect.
And
So
particularly, going back to this idea that, with resilience, not having the fear, but the difference is that fundamentally, people that we deem as courageous and incredibly successful feel exactly the same feelings that we do, have the same questioning narrative. The difference is they just do it anyway. This idea about feeling
it's,
fear and do it anyway, they feel that fear, but they just do it anyway.
and sorry, I'm giving too many personal examples, but so I used to speak I mean, I've spoken in front of like thousands and tens of thousands of people. And I thought, I'm one of these lucky presenters who doesn't feel fear. I go there, sometimes even I don't prepare so much, and I can still do, I do really pretty well. Now that I've opened up my feelings, I'm in front of an audience. I'm for a webinar. I'm just like, holy sh! I actually have a lot of fear, but it doesn't mean I don't do it now that I feel it. I just still go, okay, whew, this is important to me. Of course, I'm going to feel fear because something actually often we feel fear before doing something that's important to us or that we care about. So we can't tell our children, oh, don't feel the fear before an exam. Actually, often that they care about the exam. So it's actually, in a way, a good sign. It's instead, how do we regulate it? So before we go into the full, more solutions, because we already started with this, is how important is our role as parent in modeling? Because we've already addressed it and said, oh, well, all the parents really feel this. So how do you think, I've heard in our last webinar, a parenting expert said 80% of parenting is modeling. I don't know where this percentage comes from, but clearly it is a very important aspect. So there's no doubt. It doesn't mean if it's 50, if it's 70, 80 or whatever, it's still a lot of it is modeling. So how important is it, and how do you, because you mentioned co-regulation, that's why I want to go a bit deeper into that subject.
I think, fundamentally children are much more likely to do what they see than what we say. They are looking to us because we are the people that they're around the most. Now, that said, that does not mean that if you are unregulated and you shout at your children, everybody does. Please don't think that they don't. We all do. I do. Is when we repair that afterwards, we're modeling exactly how, I'm so sorry I shouted at you this morning. I'd asked you 17 times to put your shoes on, and I was just getting really frustrated because I was really worried about us getting out the door and being late for school because I had a really important meeting. What I probably should have done was just taken myself off for a couple of minutes and then come back, and we could have had a different conversation. So I'm sorry. So we're modeling not only the fact that we're acknowledging, we've done a reflective piece, we've modeled reflection, we've identified our emotions, we've said what it is that we did that we wish we hadn't done, and we've even offered an alternative to what we might do next time. That is more powerful than any sit down lecture lesson that we have with our children about this is how you need to manage those big frustrating emotions that you have. So I think it is really important, which is why I would also add to that when we talk about this idea of co-regulating our children's when they're dysregulated, you can only do that as a parent if you prioritize and take care of you. Self-care is not an optional extra. It's a necessity given how important children's emotions are. So I think we need to stop doing this. When they're older, I'll do that.
Yeah.
At the weekend, I'll do that. 7 months later, 7 years later, 8 years later, we still haven't given ourselves any time. So I do think it's that whole piece there.
Yeah, thank you, Maryhan. So true. And in my case, it's been, so I was a parenting coach and I was still getting angry. So let's, admit, parenting coaches, experts, whatever you want, still get angry. The thing is, there's two things that really made a difference for me. And usually it helps a lot of people who are on the angrier side or authoritarian. I used to be an authoritarian parent. The first thing was first understand the research and the fact that when I was getting angry, I was actually making it harder for my kids to do what I was asking. Just this realization, like, oh my God. So when I'm angry, their amygdala takes over, their prefrontal cortex shuts off, and then they go into fight, flight, or freeze. And in this case, the likelihood of them really doing what I'm asking is completely diminished. So I'm like, oh my God, how can I be a good, how can I live with myself if actually when my children, I want them to do something, I'm making it harder for them to do it. And I'll always remember, once I was learning this research, I go to a swimming class with my 3-year-old, and I see this mother of a small boy, and he's crying and he's crying. And she's shouting at him, stop crying, stop crying. 8 times, I counted 8 times. And I felt so bad for this child. And he ended up stopping. Then he went to the swimming class. As soon as she left, what did he do? Of course he cried. He had managed to suppress because his mother was not accepting this, but he had so much. So that's not the solution. So clearly, that's the first one. The second one that really helped me, still helps me, and actually in terms of modeling, and that's why it's such a great example of modeling, is I used to then, because I knew the research, I used to be able to watch my kids' face. Basically, I was more attuned to them, and I would raise my voice or scream, and then suddenly I would see them go into freeze or actually fight, because you can have different reactions depending on the children. Actually, it could be, you could have different children going through different reactions, that your siblings. And so I would realize that, and I would go rewind, and then I would do it differently. So as soon as I managed to catch myself, I wouldn't go into the shame cycle, because that's one of the biggest problems I had was I actually, without realizing, I would get angry, and therefore I would be ashamed. So I would justify it. I was like, but you did this, because I feel ashamed for reacting like that. And so instead of justifying angrily, rewind, and then I'd say it again in a much better voice. And what my kids do now is, because I have teens now, 3 girls, teens, 18 in 1 week, 15 and 12 and 13. They can get angry sometimes and be quite disrespectful. What's beautiful is I can look at them while they're saying this, and I go, I just need to go, and they go, okay, rewind. And they actually learned the art of self-regulation, realizing, what, they can make a mistake. You can have a bad, I had them, so obviously I'm not going to tell them, don't ever get angry at me, because that's what I used to do. What do you mean? When you got angry at me 100 times, 1,000 times, how can I not? So that's the modeling bit, is accept that actually they're just having the same. Actually, and sorry, the last bit, I'm sorry, because I'm taking, it's about you, but it's actually realizing that we're, on the modeling bit is, as their brain, their prefrontal cortex that allows them to really regulate is in development until the age of 24. And therefore, we cannot expect our kids to regulate as well as we do. So on modeling, we have to make the effort first. We can't tell our kids, don't get angry, don't do this, because they don't have the brain capacity to regulate their amygdala. And that's why your great example of co-regulation is we regulate and then we enable them. And particularly when they're younger, for the ones who have younger children, this is how actually younger children manage to get out of their difficult feelings, is when they feel the safety and the co-regulation. They actually use our mirror neurons to co-regulate, particularly when they're 2, 3, 4. So they need to feel that sense of safety and calm to be able to let go of their big feelings. So that's
and I think when we also accept this notion that in essence, particularly with really young children, part of the real difficulties in managing big emotions is also that they are struggling to communicate. Pre-verbal children are really struggling, or children who do not have not acquired enough language to be able to communicate their needs. Are often, we talk about toddler tantrums, and yet the research has shown that if you teach young children some basic signs to be able to communicate hunger, tiredness, that actually what we see is a significant reduction in what we might typically call toddler tantrums, because part of it is 100% their development of emotional regulation, because the babies are not born able to emotionally regulate. In fact, they're actually born emotionally primed, hypervigilant, because they can't protect themselves. They can't keep themselves safe. They're reliant on us. So they're already hyper alert and they do not have the communication skills. So it's about giving them, equipping them with a means of communicating their needs as best we can, as well as then scaffolding and teaching them through co-regulation.
Yeah. And so we already started now talking about solutions, because I saw a comment saying, can we get on to talk about solutions? Well, so let's clarify that the things we shared, naming feelings, rewind, understand, all of this is actually the first part of the acknowledgement. It's actually probably, we already addressed the most important part of the solutions, which are acknowledge feelings, and then, but now let's go into more ideas, because obviously everyone likes some hacks, some good tips on how we can better deal with difficult emotions. And we also had some questions about this, obviously, in prior to webinar. So let's go into that and say, how do we name feelings, and then how can we help them get out of it? Maryhan, what do you think?
I mean, I think for me, there's two strands when we're talking about equipping children in terms of helping them manage those big emotions. There's what do we do in the moment, and what do we run concurrently in terms of bolstering their knowledge of their emotions.
Yeah.
So in the moment, it's in lots of ways damage limitation. So it is about labeling the emotion. What we know is that they feel their feelings in the back of their brain, and what we want to try and do is, by naming it, the evidence suggests that we're then trying to shift the brain activation to the front part of the brain, which is like the executive functioning. It's basically where logic and problem solving and language sits. And so we name it. With older children, with younger children, the language we typically might use is, it's okay to feel angry. I can see that you're feeling jealous. I know that you're feeling frustrated. Said it's bedtime and you'd much rather be doing what you're doing. I find with older children, and this is not an age defined, but a stage defined, is that some children, it is much better to say, I wonder if you may be feeling. So some children will really rile against I'm not angry. So I wonder if you might be angry because I've stopped you doing something that you really want to, and you think I've been really mean, can sometimes be a much softer way for them. It depends. A lot of it depends on personality and the age and stage, but definitely naming it. And I personally believe you kind of go there a little bit with the narrative. So, this idea of like, I can see that you're really angry and frustrated. You've been at school all day, you've come home, and now I've told you to do your homework. And it's like, get off my back. Do I never get 5 minutes peace? When you're an adult, you're never going to do homework again. And when you have children, you're never going to do this. But I think sometimes as parents, we don't go down that bit because we feel that they're going to get more and more frustrated. But actually, what they get is, right, all right, okay, they get it. They actually understand why. So it's just that name it, acknowledge the reasons behind it, and then provide that co-regulation of, I'm here, you're safe, we'll work through this. And then, because that's what you need to do. Do not attempt to try and have a logical conversation with them. Don't say that your behavior is unreasonable. Don't say you should be doing this instead, because they're an emotional brain. They can't do that, but always then reflect back and have conversations afterwards. And I find that if you're getting a repeat pattern of behavior, and I know that there's been some comments in there around, neurodiverse children, but what you can then do is a reflective piece at some point when they're in a different kind of headspace, is that I've noticed that bedtimes have got a bit tricky. I've noticed that getting out the front door first thing in the morning has proved particularly problematic. I've noticed that coming off devices usually results in a bit of tension. So it's that I've noticed that is a much nicer way of saying, right, we need to have a conversation, because every single time I tell you to get off your phone, we have a big argument, and that's not constructive. So I think that's the sort of, how do we deal with it in the moment? The education piece is how can we begin to start having conversations? So talking about our emotions. You're in the car, you're on your way, you're stuck in traffic. God, I'm being really irritated. I can sense my stress levels are increasing because I'm worried I'm going to be late for something. But okay, right, let's put a song on. Everyone happy if I put a song on, see if we can distract ourselves or cheer ourselves up with a bit of music? Just anything around those conversations. And then the other one that is a really good one for teaching children about their emotions is you can make them into little cards. And in essence, it is, when I feel blank, I may blank, I need blank. So in essence, it's when I feel substitute emotion, sad, I may, how might I know, Jack, that you're sad? I may cry. Okay, so when you feel sad, you may cry. What I need. What do you need when you're sad? I need a hug. Lovely, Jack. Okay, you need a hug. What happens if I can't give you a hug? Maybe I'm not there. Maybe I've got my hands full. What other things? So we're starting to give them a language, a label. We've given them an identification, a self-awareness of how that emotion feels, and we're beginning to problem solve their tools. And then we can then feed that into the what do we do in the moment.
I love this. I couldn't say it better. Thank you. And so to add to this, and very much in the same, just to give a few more examples. I've seen, so Brené Brown, so well known about her courage and vulnerability, and her research of more than 3,000 papers on feeling actually show that on average we use 3 feelings: happy, sad, angry. And that this is not enough, as you say, the emotional regulation, and Dan Siegel in his Name It to Tame It shows, with neuroscience, shows that when you name the feeling, you actually reduce the intensity of the feeling in the brain. So not only you switch it to the prefrontal cortex, but also you reduce that intensity because you feel more in control. But it happens a lot more if you share a specific feeling. So not just happy, sad. And so what I've come to discover is how often we have, a big label. Oh, I'm feeling sad. And I did this exercise with so many adults and children. And so we've got feeling cards to actually help the children. So I am feeling, and I want to feel. So you don't have to buy these cards, but this is a high recommendation of actually what you can do is ask your children what they're feeling and what they want to feel, because the refractory period that I mentioned can decrease when they're actually going into what they're feeling and then realizing, oh, I can't feel, I want to feel something different. But when you look at what I'm feeling, the majority, so for example, someone who tells me they're sad. So she, chooses sad. So there are 4 colors. For the sad is in the low energy. One second, where is it? I mean, look, I don't have them. Yeah, here's sad. So it's in the low energy, so blue because it's low energy, unpleasant feeling. But then when you ask them, what else? What ends up is they can end up with 10 feelings. And so and then the exercises then reduce it to 3. And then the child, actually, what often happens is the first thing that goes away is sad, because sadness was what this feeling of being, in a low mood, etc. But actually it's disappointing, powerless, bored. And then when you look at what they want to feel, so I want to feel, and often it'll be the big yellow feelings, the high energy feelings. I want to be happy, of course. Or I want to be, motivated. And then you go on and you do the list, and after then you can have 20 feelings because they want all of the big yellow feelings. But actually, when you then reduce to 3, in the majority of cases, children want to feel safe, and adults, by the way, safe, loved, and understood or valued. Because this is our primary needs. When you look at the Maslow hierarchy of needs, this is our basic needs. And so when you really look at what you want is, yeah, it's great, I want to be happy. But first of all, I want to be safe, loved, and understood. And that's when we can give this to our children. The world, like the whole dynamic of parenting changes. And that's why on top of the cards, what we've developed is that in the Happy Confident Club that we recently launched, you can watch videos of feelings with your children and then have that exact conversation you just shared, which is so important. Because even me as a parenting coach, what I realize is I love having conversation with my kids and tell them all the science and all the great stuff that I've learned. Guess what happens? I'm sure that it happens to all of you, parenting coaches or not. Like, oh, Dad, you already explained this, but you haven't really solved it yet. You want to go deeper. And when you watch a video or do an activity about a feeling or about being resilient or being about the growth mindset and neuroplasticity, etc., when you watch a video and other kids also speak about this, and then you're prompted to talk about it. Oh, so how can I support you? Exactly as you said. How can I support you when you have this feeling? And obviously the video has given ideas. So the kids who are the younger kids go, oh, you could do what the video said. The older ones might have more strategies to share that actually that's very personal to them. And then you end up agreeing. And it's so beautiful because the probability, as we know, as parenting coaches, when the magic happens is when we've agreed and the kids actually, we've empowered them to make a decision. And that's where, coming back to screens, we're not going to address screens here, but the biggest, but we are going to address this big feeling that you already mentioned around the screens. Is removing a screen from a child is the most atrocious thing you can do because you're removing dopamine. They're in dopamine moment, in kind of quite addictive moment. Removing it is literally like, whoa, it's it's difficult feeling. So when you have to acknowledge this. So instead of removing that, we have to agree on how to do it in order not to have this big feeling. So the pre-agreement is the most important bit because then it's like, you can go, do you remember what we agreed? And, we said 10, 15 minutes. So now the screen is off. Otherwise, we also agreed what the consequence would be. And therefore, and if they don't do it, then, oh, it's really sad. But you don't have to remove that in the moment and create this huge power struggle.
Yeah.
So therefore we can agree, no, not at all. It's exactly. So this pre-agreement enables the children to actually then regulate the feelings a lot better. But what we find where the magic happens is, and I always share this example, I don't know if you've already heard it, because that was 7 years ago when I started. I knew the program worked. When this mom called me and said, my son did, my 8-year-old Mathieu, I was getting angry because he wasn't doing what I was asking. And he said, oh, mom, you're about to flip your lid. You need a bit of PBS. And PBS stands for pause, breathe, and smile. So this 8-year-old actually understood that his mother was about to go, the amygdala take over, flip her lid, fight, flight, or freeze. And instead of him going into amygdala take over, fight, flight, or freeze, he just went, Mom, let's use what we learned, PBS. And so it's just amazing because how can you get angry at a child? Well, you could, by the way. I know a lot of parents who would still get angry and would go, no way, I'm going to let my child do that. But actually, if you think about it, just imagine how more better it is to just go, you know what? I agree. We agreed together that that's not how we want to show up as a family.
Yeah.
So and you can still make mistakes. But as you said earlier, you can still make the mistake, get angry, but then because you've got the tools and the common language, you can go back to them and say, you know what? We agreed that we weren't going to get angry this way or be anxious or that's how we're going to deal with anxiety. That's where we're going to deal with sadness. So because we agreed on how we're going to deal with these big feelings, then, I didn't show up the way I wanted. I'm sorry. And and they understand better and they understand better what they can do also differently next time. Because what happened with my kids so many times is when I apologized without asking them to take responsibility, the first thing they would do is take responsibility, go, no, Dad, actually, I'm the one who annoyed you. I mean, I'm the one who was this or that. It's like, no, okay, wait. Thank you for taking responsibility. But despite this, let's discuss this even after. But first, I want to take responsibility for my anger. It's not the way I want to show up. So that's, I think, these pre-agreements is, I think, the solution to most of this. So I hope that we actually, now we're going to address questions because we're already in question time. But this was really a very important part of it.
Nadim, before you go into the questions, can I just, I've noticed that Sophie has asked whether they are able to share the recording with work colleagues and parents.
Absolutely. Yes, please do. We're going to send you the recording and you can share it. That's the idea. So thank you for asking. And so questions, we have a few that we've received prior. We've selected just the ones, and there's one from Tess. My daughter 8 struggles with the business of schools. She's academic and gets on well, but has quite a busy class with lots of big personalities and needs. Therefore, big meltdowns happen in the evening when the demands of the day catch up on her. At home, we are able to give her time alone in quiet, but this isn't possible at school, although they have offered for her to work in the library, etc. Any tips? What are your thoughts on that?
I think this is a classic, and I've seen people kind of talk particularly and make comments about children who do this. This is a child who's literally holding it all together at school, and then the minute they're out of school is when they then feel able to then for things then to overfill. I think one thing that I find really helpful in terms of teaching children, and an 8-year-old, this is a really, I mean, you could do it with younger children anyway, but it's we all have a bucket. You might have seen it as a stress bucket, but in essence, it's just a bucket. And that bucket fills throughout the day. And normally we don't realize that the bucket is filled until that last drop goes in, and then we get overwhelmed.
Story
So
of
I
my
think
life.
it's a story of us all. So it can be really helpful to have conversations with our children about what are the things that fill their bucket. So the knowledge is what fills their bucket, but also recognizing that not everything that goes into the bucket, not all are measured equally. So, for example, if your child goes into school and actually friendships are a real challenge, maybe they've got a particularly, as in this case, a particularly tricky cohort of children, that the friendships thing might half fill their bucket before they've even got to playtime. So it's being able to recognize that the things that go into the bucket are not equally in terms of proportions. So that's one thing. But you've got a tap, and the tap goes 2 ways. One way you turn it and it genuinely empties the bucket, and the tap also goes another way, and you think it empties the bucket. And so this is often, now I'm not we haven't got time to talk about tech, but for example, a lot of children will opt to either go on screens or to watch television as a way of decompressing from school. I'm not saying that they should not do that. It's the timing of when they do that, because actually what television or devices do is they simply press pause on all the stuff that they've got, that they've dealt with during the day. And so that's often why we get these explosive situations, and often when they're on those devices or on television just before they go to bed, because in essence we've not given them an opportunity to actually work through the stuff that they've got. And often with young children, play does a phenomenal job at allowing them, particularly where you've got children who are still playing with whether that's figurines, whether that's teddy bears, because often they play out a lot of the things that have happened, or maybe when they're building things, it comes out. So it's really being able to have conversations with them and understand through experimentation. There's no right or wrong. What are the things that genuinely empty your child's buckets? What are the things that they do that simply numb, distract? And can you reschedule what their day looks like after school to enjoy the numbing things earlier on, and the proper emptying happens just before bed? Otherwise, you end up with a scenario that you get with a child who then can't go to sleep at night because they've not emptied their bucket, because all of that stuff's still in there.
This is so precious, because there's so much in there. Thank you. And the devices bit can only make me think of adolescence and the series, and we're not going to go there, but letting children go to their room, and we don't know what's happening there beyond device, etc., is not helpful. And then obviously when they're teens, that's a big conversation. There are other things that need to be done, but it is so important, as you say, to help kids acknowledge and learn this, because I think that we don't even know this as adults. So what you just shared is you talked about self-care before, it's so important. We have to realize what empty our buckets, and we have to help our children identify these needs and have this conversation, because it's very difficult for them to realize. I mean, of course, play is going to work. I mean, it's easy when they were younger, but as they grow older, it becomes a lot more intricate, more there are more, and every personality is different, so it's so important to have this conversation. Thanks so much for this. So second, please don't hesitate, by the way, to ask questions live, but we're taking also questions that we had received earlier. So, and that was already mentioned, but we didn't go in more detail into it, is do you have any advice for parents of neurodivergent children who often struggle with emotional regulation? Obviously, this is a big one.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we need to remember with neurodivergent children is that fundamentally, when we talk about neurodivergence, we're just talking about different wiring in terms of the brain, and often they're part of the way that their brain is wired is that they tend to feel things more intensely, because when there's variation in situations and unpredictability, that can be really unsettling. So I think when we're looking at that, the bucket works. I've worked, in fact, you know, I've been working for 25 years with young people, and neurodivergence is where I started, is, you know, working with neurodivergent children, and I still do. But the bucket, it is really, really helpful. But what I would do with the bucket is identify some of the common things that do that, whether you laminate it, whether you put them on little stickers or post-it notes, because what you've then got is you've got them there. I think if it's visual, it's even better. So that you actually put the visual thing around schools, around the busyness of the playground, noise, whatever it is specifically for them, so that they're able to communicate by when they come back from school, they place things in their bucket, whether it's an actual physical bucket, whether it's a piece of paper that's laminated, that's on your fridge, that has got bits that they can stick on. And then they have a separate section, that they then choose something that empties their bucket. Or you can get a jam jar with lollipop sticks that you've written multiple different things that can empty their bucket, and they just choose one at random, and then they just try and do that.
Yeah.
So I think we have to be more creative. The solutions can still be the same, but we have to do them in such a way that it's much easier for them to access it, and it doesn't feel overwhelming with instruction for us. And I think that can have such a big impact.
Love this. And I would add to this the fact that, because this also can happen to very sensitive children. There are children who are just naturally more sensitive than others. And we don't have to call them hypersensitive, no label needed. If you have a sensitive child, you just have to be more consistent. And it's you know, unfortunately, it's not a difficult child. It's because that's what's super important, is that they don't feel that they're a difficult child, because otherwise they go into that loop of the belief, and therefore it only accentuates and only makes it worse. So it's so important to just go, yeah, you may be sensitive and it's fine. So let's deal with the sensitivity, and let's, you know, and then you just have to be more consistent with neurodivergent children or more sensitive children to doing the things that we've been talking about all along, you know, and of the acknowledgement, then switch them, not label the feelings, switch them. And sometimes they don't understand what they're feeling in their body. So they even need even more help to understand, oh, that might be this feeling, or it might be this one. And so they're exploring. It's an exploration mechanism, and actually we call this being detective of our feelings and our thoughts, because when you are detective of your thoughts and feelings, you increase your metacognition, you increase your emotional intelligence, and then it becomes a lot easier to unpack things and to not get overwhelmed by too many feelings. So catch them before. So we still have time for one or two questions.
Yeah, the other thing while you're looking up the question, Nadim, that I would also say is really helpful for children, and particularly neurodivergent children as well, is to be able to identify where emotions show up in their body. So really helping them, when we look at then helping them with breathing techniques, they can identify. What we can then do is ask them where that changes the feelings in the body. So most children experience emotions. Their heart will beat faster, maybe they get sweaty palms. A lot of children will complain of stomach ache. They feel their feelings in their gut, butterflies and other things. And so if we help them identify where they feel the feelings and that tension that they get in their hands and their fists, that when they then try some of the breathing techniques, they can then identify what change that has had on their physiology.
Love this. We actually have 10 powers in our Happy Comfort Me TV program. And one of the powers is what you're describing, is interoception. We call it the power of interoception. And children love it because they realize that most adults around them don't know what interoception is. Actually, if I asked here, anyone knows what interoception is? So, but we also have it in teachers, in schools, etc. No one really know. Very few people know about it. And it's actually one of our senses. It's our sixth sense of feeling sensations in our body. And said, when we develop this, whether hot or cold, or the feelings we feel. And so when we develop this, we can identify them before they become overwhelming, and we can name them. And that's why what you're saying is so important, is develop this interoception and actually help them realize that not everyone has the same interoception. So in power interoception, in the videos, we have an autistic child who says, I don't feel the feelings in my body as much as other people. So I have to develop this, because the autistic children have that. So that's where we address neurodivergence. Is actually, once you realize this, it's not, oh, I'm different and I'm not good or whatever. It's actually, I'm different, and that others can know this about me is helpful, because then I'm not treated just because I'm different, but I'm treated in a respectful way because I have that difference. So that's super important.
That's so important.
We reached 9, but I think we've addressed a lot in that. So I think we can be proud. Thank you very much. One of you actually shared the Happy Confident Club on there. It's great. So we've got a lot of resources to do that. And what I found as a parenting coach is it's great to speak about all this. What's great as well is to have resources. So like we have mindfulness journal as well for kids before they go to bed, to let go, to talk about the different feelings they felt in the day. And then to talk about the 3 things they're grateful for, to start thinking about the positive, because as human beings, we tend to focus on the negatives. And that's what also brings a lot of feeling. So when you start rewiring your brain to focus more on the positives, you can calm your system down, your nervous system, and then you can go into actually potentially journaling, because journaling also allows, before going to bed, to put some perspective into your day. So, Maryhan, as always, it's been total pleasure.
Thank you everyone so much.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for your great comments. I really felt
thank you all for
very
joining
supported.
us.
I didn't mention all of them because I was like left, right. But so it's really, thank you all. And we'd love to do another one with you, Maryhan, anytime. So
pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Bye, everyone. Have another evening. Thanks for joining, actually. Yeah, a late evening. But it's the best. It was the best time for both of us. So thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.